for the next hour, ladies and gentlemen, then we're going to get back into the kamikaze attack in Austin and what's really going on there. But for the next hour, former Congressman Traficant is our guest. James Traficant, we're very honored to have him with us. He, of course, ran in 1984 as a low-budget grassroots campaign for Congress, despite being outspent 7-1 by an incumbent Republican. Traficant won handily by 18,000 votes. He'd been reelected 7 times. In 2002, they set him up. It's completely transparent, just like with the governor of Alabama. That's now admitted. They had to release him from prison. It came out it was a complete fraud, a setup. They threatened to put somebody in prison that worked for him if they didn't lie. Same thing with James Traficant. Mr. Traficant, great to have you here with us.
Well, glad to be on your show, Alex. You've got a great show. I'm sorry I haven't been there so far, but you've really educated the American people for sure.
Well, you've been in solitary confinement and in the concentration camp, so you couldn't come on, but it's great to have you here. Sir, break down what really happened to you for some out there that may not know and why it's so important.
Well, I think what's amazing about the whole ordeal was it was a $15 million investigation over a span of 6 years, over 250 agents, all on or about the time that the Trade Center and the Pentagon were being attacked. The bottom line is the government, and this is the issue now, Alex, that will be coming to bear. The government admitted at trial voluntarily that they made no audio or videotapes on me in 6 years. And the reason they did that, it's evident, is because they had no evidence of any crimes whatsoever. They had no evidence, physical evidence. They had 7 people who were pressured to lie. 4 of them already recanted that they were pressured to lie. And there's a young man in Nigeria who submitted an affidavit to the Nigerian government that his life was ruined because he wouldn't perjure himself in the Traficant case against Traficant for the government. So this thing is going to blow up. I think before it's over, I'm going to get some money out of this, and they're going to pay dearly. I've had it, and I think everybody in Austin is familiar with the term I've had it by now.
Well, since you brought that subject up to me when we went to break, what's your bottom line on the attack on the IRS building?
Well, you know, the IRS has become such an agency where they actually have testified, Alex, before Congress, that fear is what produces compliance, voluntary compliance by the American people. And without fear, there can be no collection of taxes. Now, to me, this is an absolute oxymoron in a free republic to hear a statement like that coming from an institution such as the Internal Revenue Service. You know, my particular case is quite documented. I am the congressman that did change the burden of proof in the civil tax case. Before 1998, the taxpayer was guilty and had to prove himself innocent. I was able to change that in the 98 tax bill with the help of a Texan by the name of Bill Archer, the chairman of the Republican chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee. And Bill Archer put my language in the conference committee because the IRS had threatened a veto by President Clinton if it had the Traficant language. So I want to give tremendous credit in the state of Texas to that little man. And I think if George W. Bush would have made Bill Archer his Secretary of Treasury, this country wouldn't be in the fix it's in. But having said that, Alex, the results were dramatic. They did a study 1 year before the bill and 1 year after, and all of the variables dealt basically with the Traficant burden of proof language. Wage garnishments dropped from $3.1 million to $560,000. Property liens dropped from $670,000 to $160,000. And individual family-owned homes seized by the IRS dropped from 10,070 to 57 homes, Alex, 57 in 50 states. We've got an agency that's out of control. One of my last bill was in tandem with 2 Republicans, one from Louisiana, Billy Tozan, and one from Colorado.
Congressman James Traficant, I hate to interrupt you. We've got to go to break, sir. I am going to skip the next break coming up so we have more time. Continue from there after this quick break. Stay with us. I have studied Governor Siegelman's case when it first happened, and he's been vindicated. It was a total setup. I have studied James Traficant's case. Absolutely set up. when they can persecute governors and congressmen and put them in prison for no reason and ruin them financially, when they can persecute a sitting governor or a sitting congressman, none of us are safe. Like they tortured Congressman Hansen. We, of course, came to his aid. They dieseled him till his feet exploded, driving him around for weeks, chained up. This is the type of Hanoi Hilton stuff that's going on. We're going to talk about what happened to Traficant in prison, why it was persecuted, the IRS, what he thinks of the event in Austin, what he's told me off air, if he wants to say that on air. Then we'll talk about who targeted him for persecution and why, and how he's going to be the comeback kid. And hopefully our listeners will support him. We're going to give you an address. He didn't ask for this. I did. I just got his address for people to send him, not campaign money. He's going to run again as an independent, but to get him back on his feet so he can, because they've ruined him and sucked his treasure out of him so he can't defend himself. If this ever happens to me, and unfortunately there's a good chance it will, when I get out of prison, I want people to support me. I'm ready. I understand what happens. Okay, going back to James Traficant. James, you got cut off by the break about how you were the #1 true defender against the criminal IRS. Go ahead.
Well, Alex, first I want to say is I know you said that maybe one day when you're off the air, maybe you might have similar type of problems. And I want to say this may be one of the best compliments you'll ever get. I think you would have deserved that because you would have drawn the ire of a government that is completely out of control. And I believe your voice is becoming that strong that, quite frankly, I'm going to give you a little bit of advice now. Be very careful and watch yourself because you are having that kind of an effect. And when people start and begin to have an effect, if it's not singing to the choir, it's a real problem. But having said that, we were talking before about the Internal Revenue Service. And I'm like everybody else in the country, seeing the headline news and the fiasco and the tragedy that struck Austin. But, when you look at the Internal Revenue Service, they have evoked over the years fear and abuse. In fact, they've testified, Alex, before the Congress of the United States that without fear, they wouldn't have their voluntary, quote-unquote, voluntary compliance. Well, let me tell you something. Fear has no place in the Constitution of the United States or in the fabric of American government, and we've got a real problem. Now, in 1998, I was the individual responsible for changing the burden of proof in a civil tax case. As I said earlier, I want to tip my hat to a Texan, Mr. Bill Archer. Mr. Bill Archer was the Republican chairman of Ways and Means Committee, and the Traficant language was not in the bill, that reform bill, because the IRS had threatened a veto to President Clinton if it contained the Traficant language. Well, after the bill passed the House, I got a call from Chairman Archer, and he said, we have so much support for your bill that he said he was going to put it in the conference committee between the House and the Senate, and he did. And I honestly believe this, and I want the people of Texas who are listening to hear this, that I believe if President Bush would have named Bill Archer his Secretary of Treasury, America would not be in the fix it's in today. Now, having said that, what the Traficant bill basically said was this. Up until 98, Alex, you had an agency that says, Alex, you owe us $50,000. And you say, my God, how could I owe you $50,000? And they say, well, prove you don't, Alex. The burden of proof, you see, was on the taxpayer. The Traficant language changed that. And in 98, when the bill passed, they did a study 1 year after the passage of the bill, Alex, and they compared 1 year before the passage to 1 year after the passage. And there were three salient points of concern that were covered by their study. The first one was wage garnishment. When the burden of proof was on the taxpayer, there were 3.1 million Americans whose wages were garnished. The following year, with the burden of proof on the Internal Revenue Service, that dropped to 561,000, 3 million less, Alex. The second category was property liens. There were 670,000 the year before, 161,000 the year after. And the final category was individual family-owned homes that were seized, taken by the IRS. The year before, when the taxpayer had the burden of proof, it was 10,073. The year after, it was 57, Alex. One per state when they had to prove it. You see, one of the last measures that I had, and it really was upsetting, and Chairman Archer said he liked the bill. Well, I teamed up with two Republicans, Billy Tozan of Louisiana and Dan Schaefer of Colorado, and it was the flat tax, the fair tax, a straight consumption tax. And let me tell you something. It repeals the 16th Amendment and throws out the IRS. It abolishes all withholding, all debt taxes, all capital gains taxes, corporate taxes, individual tax on expenses for education, investment tax. And it's about time, Alex. And what everybody's saying, well, you're going to put a 25% consumption tax on us, Traficant, and you're going to bankrupt everybody with these cost increases. Listen to this study that was performed in Harvard. They said when you throw out this burdensome tax code that has destroyed companies and destroyed our competitiveness, they said they will have downward movement to gain market share. Sounds like capitalism all over again. And they predict that the prices would hardly raise